Hey everyone, so today I'm here with a different type of video to the ones that I normally make. I'm here with the awesome Veronica and awesome Brittany, and we're here just to chat about how cancer has impacted the way that we feel about having children. So to get us started, let's just chat about the cancer that we were diagnosed with, the treatment that we had, and if we're in remission, how long we've been in remission for. So Veronica, did you want to start off?
Sure. Thanks, guys. Thank you. And it's good to meet you, albeit virtually. Um, I was at 40 when I was diagnosed with a HER2 positive breast cancer. It was quite a late stage too because it had worked its way into my lymph nodes in my armpit. And so I elected to have a mastectomy of the affected breast, as well as an ancillary clearance. So then after that, I had 6 months of chemo, then 6 weeks of radiation. And because it was a HER2 positive cancer, I had immune therapy for a year. And once then that finishes, I literally have no other medication after that, as opposed to I think some of the other cancers where people continue on with some medication for quite some time. So I was 40 at that time and I had been married 18 months. So it was all quite, I guess, new. It was a shock to say the least. So it's certainly not something that was in the family before. And HER2 positive cancers don't tend to be a genetic thing anyway. It's just one of those things that happens, really. Yeah.
And so how long have you been in, sounds like remission? How long have you been in remission for?
So 5 years last week. So that was, thank you. That was a really nice milestone. I think prior to that, I kind of celebrated, but kind of like quietly. It was almost like I didn't want to jinx myself. And I still kind of do that. I put a post up on Instagram and I was still feeling a bit like, oh, I don't know. You sort of feel that kind of, you want to celebrate and you want to give hope to other people. Because I know that when I was diagnosed, I found that's what I craved the most. It was stories of people who had made it through and were doing fine. And even though it was only 5 years ago, I actually found it really hard to find stories like that. I think we've probably evolved into sharing and building communities, which is really nice. I think that would have been quite supportive to me, I think, if I had found that at the time. But 5 years now in remission. So,
great. That's great. Yeah. Congrats, Veronica.
Thank you.
And Brittany, your cancer diagnosis and treatment?
Yeah, so I was diagnosed last year in May or June, I forget now, with non-hodgkin's lymphoma, stage 2.5. So I literally woke up one morning with an 8-centimetre lump on my neck from about here to here out to about there. And I, within 2 weeks of being told I had cancer, started R-CHOP. I did 6 rounds of R-CHOP, followed by 17 rounds of radiotherapy to the area. That finished up in mid-December. Technically, I was in remission from the second round of chemo, but they confirmed it extra again. So I treat it as proper remission day at some point in December. It's all between cancer and lockdown, it's all a blur, but at some point in December I went into remission. So I'm just in that stage of getting back to life again now. I haven't quite got back to working full time yet, and I'm just still quite new to it all, really.
Yeah, still on your recovering journey, and and your beautiful hair's growing now, and and so just briefly, in case people who are watching this video haven't seen other videos of mine, I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma in 2015 when I was 22, and then I had 6 months of ABVD chemotherapy, and I similarly, I think, was clear around a third of the way through, but I had to continue chemotherapy, I guess just to make sure that the cancer was all gone. And yeah, about a week or so ago, or maybe even this week, I'm 5 years in remission. So that's really exciting. It's weird because I also have had that feeling of not wanting to jinx it or not wanting to maybe share it too early, but yeah, it's something to really celebrate.
I get that. It's a very weird feeling.
Yeah, and just always fearing that it will come back or something else will pop up, and it's really scary. So what were your feelings towards having kids before you got cancer? Remy, Veronica, you can start.
Yeah, I think because I got married fairly late, and that would have been like 38, but you know, it was something that at the back of my mind, I knew it may have been a bit of a challenge. And so once we got married, I did try IVF twice, and it didn't work. And then soon after that, I was diagnosed. And so when they suggested, oh, do you want to go through IVF before you start chemo? I was like, well, I've been down that road. You know, I'm 40 now. So I think because of my age, I kind of was semi-prepared for potentially not having children. And although like my sister had children, well, quite young, as in, I mean, she was, I think 21, 22, but I had children in my life as in having my nieces. So I think in that sense, I was very blessed to have that sort of relationship. But part of me was kind of thinking, well, this might not happen for me, which, to be honest, I think in a way it's probably a little bit, it made at least that part of the diagnosis that little bit easier. Whereas I think for some people who perhaps, you know, when they're younger and it's something that, and we all assume that we're going to have children. I think that's the thing. We just assume that we're going to. So there was a period of time there where I thought, well, it is what it is. I'm just going to have to park it. It's just not going to happen.
Like when you were kind of already preparing to maybe not have children, or you were never sure, but then when you actually got diagnosed, like you said, you had to park it, like you had to go on with treatment, you had to stop the IVF process.
Yeah. And it's kind of it becomes a really I think it's a sad thing to go through, but it's such a clear conversation then with doctors, because upon, you know, diagnosis, they were like, it's you now. This is all about you. It's not about anything else from this point onwards. And to have that very clear focus on us, I think women probably don't really focus on ourselves too much, but to have, you know, to have us at center stage and like, no, this is it. It's serious. This is the focus now. Everything else is just not important, and you'll have to deal with it later, really. And I was someone who always quite liked everything planned and organized and controlled. And, you know, when all of that is put aside, it was a really weird feeling. I don't even know how to explain it. It was just surreal that, like, yeah, nothing else matters now. This is just one focus and one focus only. Yeah.
Did you feel a lot of sadness when you realized that you had to start treatment now and you had to stop the IVF?
Yeah, look, I did. I felt so much sadness because it was like I said, because I like control. I think that was the sadness for me, was like accepting that I was not in control of anything. That I think I found really, really challenging. And I think sad that, and it sounds terrible, but I think we have to hopefully allow ourselves to be okay to feel this, but there was almost this like really unfair that everybody else was just carrying on as normal, and they got to.
Yes.
And like we don't, and then people are worried about things, which is valid. You know, people have concerns in their lives, but you look at yourself and you think you're worried about that? Like, you know, but you don't want to say it out loud because you're like, oh, I don't want to be that person. But
totally.
I think things like that I found really challenging. I found isolating. I think that, you know, how we were speaking about before, that was one of the things that made me feel most alone, was that, you know, there are people who choose not to have children. There are people who can't have children for a number of reasons. But when that choice is taken away from you, it's a different feeling.
Especially in the middle kind of your journey. You're kind of...
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I think that was, and I think that, like I was saying, I think it's where meeting people along the journey like us that can be really helpful because people understand. Yeah.
I'm curious, just, I want to focus on you, but I'm just curious, just because you and your partner were on that journey together, what was it like for him too? Was there a feeling of grief or sadness for him too to finish the IVF?
Yeah, look, I definitely think so. My partner's a fair bit younger than I. So again, I think it's something that everyone thinks that, yeah, well, I'm just going to be a dad or I'm going to be a mum. Like that, people just assume that. And I know that part of him is still very sad that he won't have children, naturally, unless something else happens in the future. But yeah, at this point in time, I think it's also that, again, the same with us. It's a fairly unique experience because obviously not everyone it's the same for them. So it's not like they can say, oh, we've decided not to have kids. I mean, it's not like there'd be many other blokes that you can go and have a drink with and say, I think that's part of it as well, because I think when we were speaking before, they've had to face the fear of losing someone, and then they've also had to deal with I guess with actually losing the opportunity to become a parent.
Yeah.
So it's double whammy, really.
And I think as well, because of cancer and that fear of maybe, dying, depending on what kind of cancer you have, or just having to embark on that journey, all of a sudden everything else has to be pushed to the side. But that doesn't mean that stuff isn't important and that there isn't grief associated with things like not being able to have kids right now, or maybe just complicating that journey. So yeah, thanks for sharing that, Veronica. What about for you, Brittany?
So we've always been, especially before cancer, we were very strongly on a team no kids. We like to joke that we're dinks, which is dual income, no kids. We've got when we needed a second car, we bought a convertible. And it was very much sort of our goal never really to have them. We have friends with kids. I have a nephew and I adore them, but it never really felt like something we needed. And then, so at the beginning of going through cancer, at the diagnosis stage, the doctor was like, look, it's unlikely that what you're going through will impact, because it's all treatment and everything's up here. He was like, it's unlikely it'll impact your fertility, but do you want to set some eggs aside? Do you want to do something? And Stuart and I were just like, no, it's fine. It's not a concern. We don't want kids. And then it was really weird, like 3/4 of the way through. I don't know if it's because everybody got pregnant last year or a lot of my friends got pregnant.
Had a lot of time on their hands. They're stuck at home.
They did. So I don't know if it's that. And, I had a lot of moments where I felt really betrayed by my body. My friends were getting these beautiful blessings. Quite a few of my friends had struggled, had done not IVF, but had had miscarriages, and had been really trying and going through treatments and things like that. And I went through this huge stage where I was like just so pissed off that my body betrayed me and theirs rewarded them, it felt like. And Stuart and I, my husband, we talked about it and we were like, well, maybe we do want kids, maybe this has changed us. Maybe we're growing, he's 28. I was 29 when I was diagnosed, 30 about a month later. And we really went through the stage. We're like, okay, well, maybe we do, but we have to put it on hold. We spoke to the doctor and he was like, you've got to wait at least a year after chemo, please, because your body's got to heal and that's the safest. And we're like, yeah, okay, that gives us time to figure it out. And we both talked about it and we're like, look, if we want to have kids, we'd like to have them before we're 35. I have my own personal views about like being old. Like I don't know, I don't like there being a massive age gap. It's just my own thing. But now that I am in remission, we're sort of back at the point where I don't think we do want kids. I think we've both sort of settled back into our life, and we both like, it is still a struggle for me at the moment. Fatigue is still a struggle. you know, I'm just not ready for that sort of thing yet. And it's definitely made us think about it more, and it may still happen, but there was definitely a lot of mixed feelings around it. And it's just been very unusual, and it's made me, like, I love being around kids. I'm so excited for my friend. She just actually, I only just found out this morning that her baby girl was delivered last week, and it's a beautiful, plump baby girl. And it's amazing. And I think I've gotten to the point where I'm past the bitterness of that I would feel when I had got the announcements during lockdown, during treatment. And now I'm just sort of back at a point where I'm like, well, my life is so different in so many ways. And I just don't know if, I don't know if it'd be something that I'd even feel well enough to do down the track. And I'm sort of most of the time okay with that. But sometimes I think it'd be pretty cute seeing how stubborn and interesting a baby of my husband and I's would be.
That's so interesting that you actually, didn't feel like you wanted to have kids, and then during that cancer chemo, was it chemo? Did you also have? Yeah, like your treatment journey. Yeah, it's kind of like you kind of experienced a bit of a shift, maybe to wanting children, and then now it's kind of stepped back again. That's so fascinating.
We sort of joked that it was like a self-preservation fear.
Yeah.
Because it was like, well, what if I mean, number one, I was very grateful that I didn't have a young kid while I was going through chemo, because that could have easily have happened. We were married 2 years ago. We could have easily, if we wanted kids, had a young child while I was going through it. So I'm really grateful I didn't have that extra stress, because I couldn't imagine being a mum to a new baby and going through chemo, as many people do. Chemo is, going through cancer is like turning life from normal mode to nightmare mode. And I just can't even think about extreme nightmare mode of cancer and child. But yeah, it was really weird. And we were talking about it a lot, to the point where we had conversations about names and how we'd want to raise them and everything like that. And then when I got better, it was sort of like, do you want to really? And we're just sort of at the point where we're like, well, maybe, but not yet.
That's so interesting. Yeah, I wonder if like you also said, as you're starting to get better, you're also processing different parts of recovery and maybe side effects. And I think there's such a dream in having children. It's a bit of an idealism about how it's going to look like as well. And so when you start experiencing your side effects, you're like, okay, but how do I actually manage a child with the body that I'm in, with, my relationship? I wonder if that must have been a big part of it too for you, like being like,
yeah. Absolutely. Look, part of it too is that I am overweight, and I would feel like I would need to ensure a healthy pregnancy, need to lose some weight. And that whole thing, like losing weight post-cancer, is something that is a journey I want to go down, but I just don't know about it yet. It's still too new. But that thought of like, well, is my body even healthy enough to carry a baby, after all of this? I mean, not to get too TMI, but things are moving again. But I just don't know if that just means that everything's okay or what. And it's very interesting to be at this point where it may still be a possibility, but we're also sort of like, well, what would a pregnancy post-cancer look like even?
Yeah. And how might it be different, or how much harder, or are there still infertility issues that you have to navigate, which, is so painful and such a difficult journey, that I think if you may be a little bit ambivalent, I can see how you're thinking, I don't even know if I want to go down that, because it's so tough, even for those who really want children. So do I want to put myself through that? And maybe, if I'm not sure.
Yeah, exactly. And that's just it. It's like, I think I would probably feel differently if I'd always wanted kids and it was absolutely 100% something that, I was dead set on. But being at this point where I'm like, could kind of take it or leave it. It's like, is it worth even pursuing that avenue, knowing that it could be harder because of this, you know? Whereas pre-cancer, it was like, oh yeah, I could probably get pregnant if I wanted to. I've always been fairly regular and healthy and all of that. So it was kind of just in the back of my mind as like, you know, if I want to, it wouldn't be too hard. Whereas now it's like, well, it probably would be harder and it would come with risks and concerns. And do I want to go down that route when I'm not, you know, so gung-ho on having kids even?
I think, I don't know how you feel, Brittany, but I also feel that, you know, having gone through this, that there is quite a lot of reassessing that you do.
Yeah.
And I think, and again, I think because we assume that life's going to go down one path and then clearly it's not, you think, actually, what is it that I want? And I think, and, you know, obviously in relationships, another topic, I mean, the way this affects relationships is huge, because both people probably go through a period of reassessment, and it's not necessarily always going to work out for the best, because if people perhaps find that they do want different things, or things that they felt wasn't going to be for them, then turns out that you might want to try something different. So I definitely found that there is a lot of that quite deep introspection. What is it that I really want, and what do I want my life to be after this, now that it feels like a second chance?
Yes, absolutely. You're entirely right. It was such a time of introspection for us. And, you know, at the beginning of it, I mean, not to segue too much, but at the beginning I was planning to start a diploma in financial planning this year and do that 6 years part-time, whilst working full to part-time. And after everything I went through last year, I was just like, I can't imagine 6 years of struggle after everything I went through. The money and the career and all of that just no longer became worth it. And I think it's the same with kids. It's like, it's made me see how much more important family and friendship and relationships are to me. And definitely emphasized wanting kids. I think too, maybe because we were locked down and it was just my husband and I for most of the time, maybe that meant that we were feeling a bit lonely and a bit nostalgic for kids, and nostalgic for that naivety that you feel before cancer, the invulnerability that you feel. You know, you don't realize it, but you do feel a bit more like, oh, those things can't happen to me, and then they do, and you're like, oh shoot.
So true. That's a really good insight as well around maybe that loneliness being at home with just you and your partner. I can see how that might kind of bring people along that journey to maybe wanting kids, but then how not genuine isn't the right word, but like how lasting is that once life goes back to normal?
Yeah, look, there was a lot that I felt certain of as I went through treatment that I feel very differently about now, and I feel like I must have been 6 different people throughout the whole time.
I think it's really interesting that we're actually all three women who weren't necessarily really certain that we wanted children in our life, because I was the same. I actually for a long time didn't want children, and I'd often say that to my friends all the time, that I just don't want kids, and everyone would be like, are you sure? Surely you'll come around. And if I mention it to mom and dad, they'd get really freaked out, and they're also Spanish, so the idea of us not having children is really terrifying to them. They want your grandparents so bad. But for the longest time I don't know, I just didn't. And I got diagnosed at 22, and they also told me when I first got diagnosed, hey, there is a chance that you could become infertile, but it's pretty low. This chemotherapy and the treatment that you're going through probably won't affect infertility, but we're not sure. I feel like I remember the nurse saying that there was a 10% chance, but to be honest, I don't actually know if that was a real percentage or if I made that up, because when I've looked into it, it doesn't feel like it is 10%. It feels like it's quite rare to kind of struggle with infertility. But they did say, if you want to try, you should try it younger, because your body will have had some kind of damage, to some degree, and we don't know what kind. So if you want to have kids, it's better to try younger, because the longer you wait with the chemo impacts, we just don't know what would happen. So already I've always been someone who's like, oh, I don't think I want to have kids. And now you're telling me like I have to have them younger rather than like older. That felt like, yeah, I don't know if I really want that. At the time I was in like a long-term relationship, but that ended about 2 years ago suddenly. And traumatically, he'd been kind of cheating online with people during my whole recovery process.
Oh,
And
God.
yeah, so really traumatic.
I'm
how
so
that
sorry to hear.
ended.
That's messed up.
Yeah, really messed up, really messed up. Because like you often hear people say like, oh, things like cancer bring people together. You like trauma bonded for life, you can't break
It can
that.
tear people apart just as easily.
Yeah.
It can.
100%.
And also, you don't realize sometimes what's happening to people internally because he wasn't one to share. So you don't actually know sometimes how it can be tearing them apart or, it's anyway, that's its own topic in and of itself. But he, I think, probably wanted to have kids, but he also wasn't sure. We were both very young. But I remember one day during chemotherapy, like breaking down and crying in the car, being really upset about the idea that I couldn't have kids. And if that ended up being something really important to him, that would end us. And, he was very comforting in that moment. But I think that can be a great fear in relationships too. If all of a sudden you think maybe I will become infertile, and what if the other person decides like what they want, and what does that mean for us and then for me going forward? But I think now I'm in a relationship with someone I've been with like a bit over a year, and he has 3 small children, and we have them 50% of the time. So I've got like step kids, and they're the best, but intense. They're intense and they take a lot of energy. And because I've continued to have fatigue, even 5 years on, it's made me think a lot about whether or not I would want to have children. I feel like at the moment, I'm more on the fence. I used to be at like a hard no, whereas now I'm like, I think I could. I think I could be happy with one, and I think I could be happy with none. Like I don't necessarily need it to go either way. But the thing is, I think I've realized that even if I had one, I could only have one. I would need to like strategize my life big time. I need to put in so much, like to implement so much to take care of myself, to maybe take care of my partner, like the step kids. Like, how do we manage that time? Because babies affect your sleep, and that's like the best thing for fatigue. Like you need to be sleeping regularly, long hours. Like I often sleep like 10 hours, or if I've had a big week, like I might sleep a bit more. So it's like, how do you manage a little baby with fatigue? And I think as well, being like a psychologist, you learn so much about attachment and the importance of mothers or fathers attaching to their children. And if you're constantly fatigued and down and depressed, I sometimes fear that I'm not going to attach well, because I'm just going to be like, I can't actually deal with the baby. Like my body feels miserable. I actually can't handle it physically. So that's something that, I don't know, I feel so torn about. At the moment, I feel like I don't know. I think if I'm going to try, it'll probably be in 2 years when I hit 30. 31, just because in case of what they told me, I might have more problems if I wait longer. But I kind of get overwhelmed thinking about how much I'd have to plan for that baby. And I have like a sister who, she jokes about wanting to have like 6 kids. She's like 26, I think, or 25. But, she's always wanted to have kids, and she wants to have a few, like 2 or 3, I imagine. And I think if I was someone like her and I got sick, how much grief would I have to go through to process that maybe I could only have one? To be able to actually 100%. Manage and be a good mom for the baby and really be present, without sacrificing too much for myself. So, and that's the thing too, I've always been quite, career driven. I love my work, but fatigue has had to make me focus on myself even more.
I think I feel a lot of those things too. Like I haven't quite realized it until you said it, but that's absolutely true. Like thinking about, my husband and I, we have very clear financial goals and goals in life. So that what it means is for his career, like he's downstairs working right now. He works 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, but often will come home, have dinner and do a bit more work as well. And what that means is that I do my 6 hours of work, and then I do cooking and cleaning, grocery shopping. Like, I basically run the whole household, and it's a lot. It's a lot post chemo, post everything I've been through to be working 6 hours a day. Sometimes it gets really busy at work. Sorry, I've just got to move. One of my legs has gone numb.
All good.
You know, it's a lot for me to run a household and run and work and everything. And then I think about, well, being who I am, being a person who can't relax in a messy environment, and knowing how messy kids are is part of it. And yeah, thinking about how much work it would be and how much more would require to change when I've already just had to change so much to get to where I'm at. It's just a lot. It's just overwhelming beginning to think about it all. Whereas before it would have been like we know kids change a lot, but when you haven't gone through cancer or don't have an immune disease or don't have all these things and you're a normal, healthy person, you're sort of feeling equipped to handle it a bit better. But for me, it's like, I don't know. I'm still modeling my way through this new reality for me. I couldn't imagine adding being a mum onto it as well.
I think what it's really interesting, and I completely feel very much for everything that you've shared. So thank you. And I think it's a really important conversation to have, actually, where what I think the opportunity this has given us, which is strange that an illness would, result in that, but it's that we actually put ourselves first and our health. Like this, it's actually okay to have these thoughts and feelings and conversation around, yeah, it'd be lovely to have one, but actually the reality is my health would probably be impacted by it. And whether that would be emotional, how much of that can we really give fairly before then it impacts us. And I know for myself, I just wouldn't be able to cope. I wouldn't really have the energy, the emotion, the presence to make it fair. And so I think there's other opportunities. I've got nieces, I can volunteer, and maybe there's other ways in which we connect with other human beings on the planet and help. But I think I found that it's actually, I found it quite liberating being able to say to people and have that conversation, no, this is the life I need now, and it's not going to involve that. And it's really interesting what you said, Charlene, where you then do worry about, well, what's the impact of that on my relationship? Because really, I mean, the other person can go away and have a relationship and children with someone else if they want, but obviously I'm not going to have that with anyone. But by the same token, I've also heard of women who are like, actually, this relationship is no longer for me because I want something else entirely. So I think it's interesting that it opens up that okayness for us to put ourselves first, whereas I think a lot of the time women are a little bit, oh, that's not quite the okay thing to say or to feel.
Yeah.
And then you also have, I think, sometimes stereotypes or assumptions that women who choose not to have children or don't even give it a go, that, you're inherently selfish or focusing too much on yourself. I think over time that has shifted a bit. I've seen that within my own friend groups and things. It seems less so, but still, I think that sentiment is still there. And I think as well, if you're someone with an illness or recovering from an illness, or you have a disability, it can be very easy to be like, yeah, but it's worth it. The child, you get so much love from the child and you just like figure it out. And I just think it's a completely different experience if you actually have to manage disability or illness or fatigue, because the costs that we have to give for that is so much greater, which if you just want children and that's like your dream, of course that's worth it. But if you wanted to have a few things going, you might not feel like it is worth it, because the amount of sacrifice, the toll that it would take, which we know for healthy individuals, it's still a massive toll. But it's kind of an assumption that we should also take that toll, but they don't realize the toll actually that we have to take. I don't know if that makes sense. But
I think with that idea too, something I've really come to the idea of is it can actually be quite selfless to decide not to have kids, because in a lot of ways, the way that I've thought about it is like, if I have a kid, I want to be able to be there for them. I want to teach them. I want to be hands-on. I want to really raise them. I don't want to just sort of set and forget with another human life. Like it's something that if I were to do it, I would have to dedicate so much of my time and so much of me to do it, to feel like I'm raising them right. You know, I have very strong opinions and principles on many different topics, and I would want to make sure I spent the time to know that my child is financially educated, is not, you know, is aware of the struggles of other people, is compassionate, is all these things. And for me, it's like, to me, it almost seems selfish to have a kid just because I might want it, when I know that it might make their life harder because I can't be the mum that I would have been pre-cancer. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I think that's something that I also fear, that if I have a child, that I would become quite mean to myself, that I'd talk down to myself around that. And I think if you make that decision, you have so much self-compassion. And I think that's where the whole strategizing thing comes from. It's like, how do I be the best mom that I can, but be kind to myself, because I have gone through this and I can't be the mom I would have been pre-cancer. But at the same time, it's like, if that would cause just too much stress and you feel ambivalent, why can't we choose not to? Yeah. And something I actually had the thought of, when I think about having a child, I know that when people, from the moment that they get pregnant, there can be a lot of judgment about how you do things, how you don't do things. And I think sometimes I feel like I kind of like what you were saying, Brittany, around not feeling like you might be the mum you would have been pre-cancer. Like, for example, when I think about maybe having a child, I don't know what pregnancy is going to be like. I don't know how fatigued I will be, how much of an impact that will have on me. If I have a birth, you know, when I birth a child, I'm thinking, could I actually even do a natural birth? I think I'd have to have a planned cesarean because of the fatigue. Like, births can take 2 days or 3 days. Like, they can take a long time. They're so intense on the body. And, you know, what judgment might I get from choosing to have a planned cesarean now that everyone's pushing for natural births? Breastfeeding, is that something that my body will be able to do because of the impact of chemotherapy? Things like even like daycare, like when I, you know, maybe past that year of, you know, caring for the child, if I want to go back to work, if I choose daycare, not even just for work, but to manage my fatigue, what judgments might I have around that? And I think like kind of even just preparing yourself to be able to defend your position and have compassion for yourself. And I don't know, that's, I don't know how to describe it, that it's just okay, that it's okay.
Yeah.
People might think it's an excuse, but that doesn't matter. Even people who choose those things and who haven't been through cancer, it's okay to choose that if that feels right to you. But you kind of sometimes just like even predict all that stuff coming. Did you guys have anything else that you wanted to add to this discussion, just around how you're feeling about the future regarding kids? Or
yeah, look, I still feel like it could happen, but I'm not, just decided not to put that pressure on myself. And yeah, I think this conversation has actually really helped me understand a bit more about some of the fears that I was having but couldn't really word, and help me see, especially thanks to you, Veronica, you know, that there is a different narrative for everybody. And you know, you can, it's not the end of the world if you don't have kids.
Yeah. Look, I would say as well that this whole journey has then opened up a path for me where I started coaching high school kids as part of where I work. They offer an opportunity for people to volunteer. And I thought, you know, I took that up and I really thoroughly enjoyed it. And it really kind of helped me to feel even more okay with, I think, the idea that being a mother is all about giving birth to another being, whereas we can still have very nurturing characteristics and feelings and the ability to care for other humans and to show love and compassion and help them along the way without actually having to have given birth to them. And so it actually opens a world up to us having, or for me, maybe there is more of an opportunity to be more conscious of the community around you, family, friends, like you were saying, Brittany. You actually have more of an impact on far more children than just perhaps if you had your own. So that for me is actually, I found that really fulfilling. And so I don't actually feel like I've missed out on maybe at times having perhaps shown some motherly affection or guidance or love.
That's such a good point. And I think as well, like you guys have already mentioned, there are children in our lives that we can also nurture, even if we don't have children, because we can't, we choose not to. So thank you guys for watching, and thank you Veronica and Brittany for coming along and chatting about how cancer's impacted your feelings towards having kids.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thank you. No, thank you. It's been great. Thanks so much.
And yeah, if the people watching want to follow you somewhere on the internet, where can they find you?
I'm on Instagram at Ronnie Leonardo. So yeah, I've shared my journey once treatment was over, and I sort of share a lot about the stuff that I'm doing now and life post-cancer. Yeah.
Awesome. And what about you, Brittany?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram as well at brittany.norma. So I'm still getting used to sharing about what's going on. So there's a lot of just everyday life, but my interest and my hobbies, but also, yeah, with that view of how things are and what it's like post cancer as well. It's a good spot. A lot of fashion on there as well.
A lot of fashion? Yeah, that's great. Yeah. I'm going to watch you grow your hair out there as well.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. You can see where it was blue, pink, purple for 2 years ago. So
yeah, you're going to go do that again once it's a bit longer?
Yeah, I think I just want to go back to blonde. I just really settled into a look that felt right before I lost all my hair. Like I loved my hair right before I lost it, and that's been quite its own little challenge. So just want to be blonde for a while again. That was fun.
Great. But thank you guys for coming on, and hopefully we'll make another video together soon.
Absolutely, let me know.
Right, brilliant. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.